Welcome to the Common Cool Podcast,
where we discuss the power of addiction,
the art of suffering,
and the joy of freedom.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Common Cool Podcast. My name is Miguel.
And I'm Jeff.
Hey, we've been a little bit absent for the last few weeks. We had to take a little break. It wasn't necessarily planned, but you know what happened? Life happened. And busy for both of us in different ways. I don't know, Jeff, what's been going on with you on your side?
You know, I think we both discussed it. You know, it's been like 4 or 5 weeks, hasn't it? At least. But yeah, both of us. You know, I picked up some consulting work. You know, so I had to add that to my. You know, I have two different plates. One's responsibilities and one's enjoyment. You know. So I had to add that to my responsibility plate, and sometimes my responsibility plate gets pretty overfilled. And kind of in the spirit of this project too, it's just like moderation, you know, moderating work. Maybe I put a little bit too much, especially when having this to do. You know, I consider this to be, you know, a lot of things in life are kind of in the middle there. Like I really enjoy doing this. I really learn a lot. But there is the kind of behind the scenes stuff that like feels like more responsibility. And long story short, yeah, my life got a little off balance. So right now it's feels good again. I'm excited to get back to the work.
Yeah, and same here. I do a lot of different things beyond the podcast, and one of many is that I do AI engineering consulting. And my only customer that I have on the consulting side. This has a lot of work, and we had to decipher a lot of different challenges and whatnot. So it just got really, really, really busy. You need to balance that with still having self-care, time to still work out and meditate and do all the things. So at some point, there's just not enough time to do everything. But I think both Jeff and I kind of came to the conclusion like, hey, we need to get back on. Because number one, we really enjoy this. Number two, we think that the content can help others the same way that certain things have helped us. And we just want to give that back to the community, you know, help other addicts struggling with very similar problems that we have struggled with, and bring people to share their wealth of information and wisdom.
Yeah.
So now we're ramping up for, let's call it a second season.
Two. Yeah. That's a good idea. Yeah, I think that we've learned in season one, when you say like for people, you know, helping people who are struggling with addiction. I think what a lot of will be learned, especially through like some of that brain chemistry stuff with the neurological stuff, it just like, and you know, one of the big take homes was like anyone could become an addict. You know, everyone has, you know, the chemistry to become an addict, you know, and it's just a matter of, so do you find like that line between addict and non-addict, it can get blurry sometimes, you know, it can get, you know, people get obsessed, people get compulsive behaviors. And I think in talking with, you know, with that, with those guys who were, you know, the deceptive mind, you know, that idea of like, trying to like growing habits to try to control that like chaotic mind and how your mind can deceive you at certain points. I thought that was really, really interesting. And some of the things that we learned from, you know, Dr. Justin Baker and that stuff from Rick Green was like mind blowing. You know, the dopamine rewards, dopamine deficit. I don't know. Yeah, check out the episode. But dopamine is so like dopamine. You hear dopamine all the time now. So hopefully we'll do some new stuff on dopamine in season 2.
Yeah, I think one of the big takeaways, I think for me from like Justin's episode is this whole idea that he walked us through this adaptive, natural process that all human beings go through in order to reach balance. He talked about how the catecholamine system, you know, is trying to balance you out. Like if you're too high, it tries to get you lower. If you're too low, it tries to get you higher. But it doesn't discriminate in a sense. Like if you're trying out different substances and one of those substances sort of takes you to that balance, your brain is not going to discriminate. It's just going to feel like, oh, I found the solution to the problem. And how he talked about how in teenage years that sort of adaptive system or that adaptive process is more prevalent. And in fact, it's a natural sort of part of your evolution going from childhood to adult. That was super interesting. I just never considered that to be sort of like a natural, normal thing, just going through the experimentation just to get yourself some sort of balance. That was super interesting.
Yeah, and just the idea, like, the longer a person waits, so the longer the person waits, to start, I guess, that process, the better chance they have of quitting it. Like if you start using it, when you're 12, 13, you're going to have a much harder time in your mid-20s and your mid-30s than a person that started at 25. Not to say you can't become a full-blown addict either way. And also the stuff that Evian brought up, that stuff, the unconscious and being able, it seems like a lot of that stuff just goes into this space where it's like the brain, and we don't know enough about it right now, but it kind of goes in that spiritual piece, those spiritual principles, and finding ways to stop, what Jordan had told us in the meditation stuff, stop and find that refuge and smile. Like some of the simplest things, like, you don't think about, like, can change your whole day and change your whole attitude, and change your habits. If you get to a certain place and you always in your thinking, and it's like, ugh, and you never think like, okay, maybe the only thing I can do here is smile, and maybe that'll work. But you get some great information. Hopefully we'll get him back this season too. You'd said something about him having some new stuff going on too.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we would love to bring Jordan back. I think also in the next season, we want to cover some more subtle aspects of addiction and even some more subtle types of addiction. Jeff and I were talking about earlier, how to some extent, some of us experience addiction to misery. Like we just can't stand it when things are very quote unquote normal or balanced. Like somehow we try to find something to make it feel like it's not. And if we come back to the present moment, we'll realize, oh no, that things are balanced, but sometimes we're addicted to our own brain chemicals. And, if we're addicted to our own adrenaline, our own, epinephrine and cortisol, well, we're going to be looking for chaos because then we can feel that rush. So anyway, we'll cover a lot more of those things. So we're excited about that. Also things like work addiction, we find line between, this idea of like, hey, I'm very passionate about what I do and I spend a lot of time doing it because I'm passionate about it. There's a fine line between that and then just having a work addiction. The work addiction comes in where you just can't stop. And also it's like you need it to feel okay. Like if you're not doing it, you don't feel okay.
Yeah.
Like you're finding that escape in your work. So it's not that work's the problem, it's the intention behind it. So anyway, we're going to cover all these different topics in season 2.
Yeah, there's so many things that I want to cover, you want to cover, and kind of going more deep into some of this stuff, but also like having episodes where it's just really day-to-day information, like, learning how to plan your recovery, plan your life. There's so many, once you're able to kind of, I guess, untangle this mess, like you bring out core beliefs like that. Like, those are the things that originally drove a lot of people into like addiction, is to kind of run from like that drive. That's like, I must be better. I must be producing. And for some people, it's not necessarily a status thing. It's not a money and wealth thing. It's a safety thing. They at very young age, they didn't feel safe, or to some extent, were kind of wired in a way where that they just felt like they needed to continue to do something, or things would just get catastrophic. There's that belief, and that's like it comes from very young, or it can be just a status thing. It's addicted to status or addicted to, attention, affirmation. People like, have an internal, like, they don't have an internal, like, system. They don't have an internal, like, locus of control. Like, everything they get is from the outside. I think now we're just talking about addictive tendencies.
No, 100%. And yeah, I think, that'll be an interesting thing to talk about too. Like, what's the difference between an addictive tendency and a full-on addiction? Like where is that line? And how does it look like to be on one side of the line versus the other? So yeah, I think looking forward to a next set of guests and next set of episodes. We still have a couple of recordings from the previous batch that we will bring into this season as well. So stay tuned for all that.
Yeah, those are good ones. Yeah, for sure. And encourage anyone that watches this or, send in ideas in the chat of like one of the videos. We don't get a whole ton of them, so we'll be able to, yeah. But we'd love to hear comments and any ideas about what you all might want to hear or, Yeah,
exactly. So our viewership is still, modest in size, and we'd love to continue to grow it. And we'd like your feedback, figure out, well, how do we shape up this podcast? Like, how does it become more useful to you? What are some of the topics you'd like to hear about? Like, is there anything in the format that you think could be more useful to you? So yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys, the good and the bad. We want to hear it all. So feel free to comment on the chat. Or in the comments, put some comments on the video.
Yeah, I'd like to do some more of those educational, just you and I stuff, like educational episodes. Maybe someday we'll get to a place where we can do some like group, group interviews or roundtables. Who knows? Like,
yeah, we can do some panels. I think doing some panels will be pretty interesting. We can bring some of the guests that have been here before. We can bring them all, not all of them at once, but like we can bring some of them in a group and have even a nice debate about specific topics. So that could be pretty interesting and engaging as well.
Cool. Yeah. I think enough said. We'll get another episode out here hopefully next week. This is Sunday, July. What is it? July what?
7th, today's 7th.
July 7th, 2000.
Yeah. By the 9th, we should have a new episode. We have an episode coming with that gentleman named Kevin Peterson. I believe is his name.
Yep.
We'll talk about the family dynamics in addiction, sort of like the treatment modalities that can occur when there's a family problem. It's not just like an individual problem, but there's some family dynamics present, like the kid is addicted and parents want him to recover, or maybe the husband or wife is addicted and becomes a marital / family problem. So it's a pretty good episode. Looking forward to that.
Yep. Yes, sir. So I think that's all we have.
That's it. All right. Well, pretty excited, Jeff, for us to go into our next set of videos. And again, hope to hear from you guys.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.